you have to understand that I, for example, make it my, I make living wages, so to speak, by offering to our students a kind of literature that I hope raises their discourse, as they say in philosophy, slightly, and I don't think this book does that. I know that we have all sorts of constraints and reasons for choosing this instead of another way, so I'm not faulting anybody. If I had been a member of the committee, probably we would have the exact same book. So this is just said in all sincerity, so that you know, don't be surprised, you're not alone if once you have actually read the book in all the depth that I hope you will be reading it, you will find yourself with many others not liking it. That said, because the topic of the book is very important, very relevant, it's an issue of human rights after all, okay? I think that you will have plenty of opportunities to focus on this issue, maybe just by providing our students, for example, with excerpts of the military code that is mentioned here, but only excerpted in 2 paragraphs. You may want to add another couple of paragraphs to that. Or, by the time the law passes, actually have them read the actual repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, etc. That's completely up to you. But I want to say there is a lot that can be done with this book, even if the book by itself doesn't do it. That's one thing. The other thing that I was intrigued by, let's say, is, of course, the psychological personality that comes across Reichenbach's personality. Very strong personality, clearly a sort of a born leader, if we want to talk at these terms. He certainly has a lot of charm and is very intelligent, so he can certainly, I mean, he has demonstrated it, you know, organize people under very tough conditions. You know, few of us would have been able to do what he did in the basement of the Air Force Academy. So, no doubt about it. But what struck me was his love-hate relationship with military discipline. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became to me. I think, I am no psychologist, I leave it to others, but let's say I'm a mother of boys. It struck me that what he loves in the military is exactly that which he says he hates, namely the mindless discipline. To have somebody from the outside telling him what to do, when to do it, how to do it, by the minute. Because he, Reichenbach, by himself, apparently, at least back then, now he's older, so maybe he has matured, does not have self-discipline enough to regulate, among other things, his sexual urges, which in his case, whether heterosexual or homosexual, same thing here, okay, in his case, are very difficult apparently to discipline, okay? He does not, he has all sorts of sudden urges that he has to satisfy right there and then. This, I think, is a very important topic for us. Not only in general, any anthropologist will tell you that civilization is largely based on a curbing of the sexual instinct. But apart from these generalities, I think this is very important for people in the age group of our freshmen. And in an age in which between internet, the lives of the politicians, etc., the idea of self-discipline, not external discipline, not the church telling you, the army telling you, mom and dad telling you what to do, but you telling yourself, who am I and what do I want? And what is important to me and for my dignity and the dignity of the people around me? That is, I think, a splendid topic that could be, not easy, but a splendid topic that could be of great importance to many of the freshmen to discuss. And I would just start out with some of the most outrageous anecdotes that have rightly told as the protagonist. Thanks.
things we want our students to get out of any first grade reading. So, especially for people who haven't read the book, what sorts of transitions could the writing in the book go through? And how could that relate to what our students are going through as well?
So Riken goes through several different transitions throughout the book. He transitions from a child to an adult. He transitions from a high school atmosphere, a civilian lifestyle, into a military academy, being a freshman who are not even seen as cadets yet. And so that transition is one of the most, I guess, striking to him, because he's coming off of the summer where he's, just hanging out with his friends, and all of a sudden he's in what they're calling Beast, First Beast and Second Beast. And it's basically their basic training program, in which they are tortured for weeks, and basically breaking their spirit to be able to do the mindless following of these rules, doing what you are told when you're told to the minute. And then he transitions out of that, and he's actually recognized into being called a cadet, and then the restrictions are slowly fading away. And basically all throughout the college experience or the academy experience, every year there is a transition into having more freedoms and more rights and more freedoms, and less stringent expectations. There's from the very beginning where you're absolutely nothing, you're broken down to nothing, to being in a position where you are doing that breaking down to somebody else. So I think those, and then of course the transition of him realizing that he's attracted to men and actually coming out, obviously is really a good book.
Well, the big ones.
Yeah, there's sort of, I think, sort of something Allegra said that, initially he's quite shy as a child, and he's, underclassmen, he's from his background, but he does assume this sort of leadership role. He does come into himself in this way. Partly because of circumstance, there's this recognition that they're vulnerable, and sort of he takes this leadership role and calls this meeting in the basement and forms this underground. Everybody looks up to him as the de facto leader, even though he denies it. But you do see this kind of transition in him and in his personality. But the transition, to being a gay man is I think, one of the sort of the messiest, because he denies it, he goes back and forth, he has a relationship with a woman, man, woman, and so it's not clear. Some of them are quite clear. You go from beast to being recognized, and that transition is pretty clear cut. Some of them are a lot more fraught.
Well, just another, can I answer to see, the other thing that I would really discuss with the students, but it takes preparation to discuss these things, because few of us are experts in these matters. So, parenthesis closed. But he does have this, what philosophers would call this essentialist take on being either homosexual or heterosexual. I find it really extraordinary. First of all, how does he know? Secondly, there is a lot of evidence against that. And thirdly, his whole book is based on exactly this uncertainty, wishy-washy, and then final maturity and recognizing of oneself. But when he writes, pardon me, but last sentence of the book, the one that really infuriated me. Listen to this. The God who made me homosexual, he knows, and who continues to be for meeting the various challenges of this world. This is one of the many people he acknowledges. Now, that is maybe a metaphor, but maybe it is intended literally. The God who made me homosexual, which means indeed that he seems to believe that there is like a sham heterosexual, I assume that's where God makes him, okay? And that something there says this guy will be homosexual and this guy will be a lesbian. This, in my opinion, flies in the face of a lot of evidence, both biological, psychological, sociological, etc., and certainly is a much too strong statement for somebody who has been searching for his identity since day one, okay, and who has met a lot of other people even younger than him, who sometimes it seems to me he tries to push in the direction of admitting to being homosexual, while he is no psychologist and he's not their father either, and he should let go of that decision and not make it for others. That's where I would also discuss these issues. What is exactly a homosexual? I personally, for example, and I have no scientific background, think that each one of us has a little bit of both. And it is a matter of perhaps a slight matter of biology and a lot of matters of historical and social circumstances, how we end up living our lives, maybe indeed as homosexuals or not. And many of us never actually make this decision.
And you're right, he does say it. He says it categorically a number of times with that concept of that God made me this way, God made you great for me. And so I think that is a question that can be discussed quite a bit. But I think one of the interesting things is that even though he sort of states it as this category, he demonstrates that life is quite fluid.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's it's one of the tensions in the book that sort of leads us more toward this sort of more complex notion of sexuality that he seems is not explicitly saying.
I applied to the Agricultural Academy and almost got in. But I did join the Navy, actually, instead. And so one of the transitions that I'm most interested in today, what everybody has already said, is that in the military, you do make you start at zero. But then by the time you're a junior, senior, you're one of the ones that's exploiting the younger people. And I think that fits his whole life, in the sense that he's had a lot of troubles, he's had a lot of people who gave him difficulty following other military leaders, etc. But then he beat God. But he becomes, to some extent, all of those people as it goes along. It's a very interesting thing to discuss.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what's the sort of accepted definition of what is homosexuality? If somebody, student asks, so here he's talking about, is it nature and nurture? Is it fluid? Is it innate? What would be your answer? Sorry. I've heard you say this.
So, one of the things that we talk about in the Safe Space program is that you can't define an identity because it's a very personal thing to everybody. So if somebody calls themselves gay or lesbian, bisexual, transgender,